Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the Weekend Wellness Hour show. I am very excited to have a returning guest and dear friend, Linda Downey, joining us today to talk about spiritual healing, spiritual wounding, and how do we recover from that. So, Linda has been on before. She's a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. She has been a transformational health coach. She does a lot, and I'm going to let her share a little bit more about herself since it's been a while since we've had her on. So thank you, Linda, for joining us today.
Oh, Amy, thanks so much. I love chatting with you all the time, on or off the air. So thank you. And yeah, it has been a while. I'm happy to explain a little bit about what all those things mean. FDN, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, transformational health coach, etc. So my journey in health and wellness, it's always been what I've been passionate about. I think I've been in this field for 38 years now, at least, maybe even 40. And now that I think, and was always passionate about health and wellness, and really struggled a lot in my adult life, starting in my 20s with my own health. And I got autoimmune conditions and I had gut issues and all of that. And so I went back to school and became a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner so that I didn't have to go to medical school, but that I could do the things to help people. What I was learning was gut health. I think most people understand now that that's a very important thing, but gut health and liver and getting toxins out of the body. And I was doing that with people and in my own journey, and got great results, except that at some point things came back, or the results were great, but not exactly where people wanted. Like they felt better, but not totally what they wanted. So I kept looking, like, what else is there? And what's really come out in the last several years is that stress is the number one root cause, because our nervous system, as you know, with what you do, our nervous system regulates everything. And when that nervous system is triggered in fight or flight, then other systems of the body are shut off, not doing their best job. And so, okay, stress. Well, stress might be opening your emails today, but stress can also be sitting in your body since you were 5 years old. If you grew up in an alcoholic household, which I did, or whatever else shows up in life. And so when those things are still sitting in the body, there's a wounding there. There's a disconnect from ourself, because we had to learn how to cope with those things. And the way that we cope might be successful at the time, but it might also keep us stressed. So that's the place where I went back to school again and got trained in really spiritual healing, because it is a spiritual wounding. And the word trauma is very widely used today, but to me, I'm even just going to say life experiences. Life experiences can be traumatic enough to keep the nervous system triggered on. So that's kind of like what all those titles mean, and my journey.
And that's great. And as you became trained in being a whole life coach and looking at the spiritual aspect of how a person heals, you had mentioned the word spiritual wounding. Can you go into what do you mean by that? Just to help us get some clarity on that, and so we can dive into like how do we even heal from that?
Sure. So I'm going to say that when we come into this life as a newborn baby, and our spirit is love, we come from love.
Yeah.
We come from source energy, and source energy is love, is the frequency. If you're paying any attention to conversations about energy these days, everything in our body is an energetic frequency. So the source energy that really allows our body to do its job, our cells to do their function, is the energetic frequency of love. Okay. When we arrive in this world and then things happen and we start to make decisions about the world and about ourselves, like even as 2 and 3 year olds because children, even pre-language, they can feel the energy of the people around them. They can feel when something is a problem. So that puts fear into the system. And so we start to make decisions about ourselves like, I must not be important. I'm not lovable.
Yeah.
That's not the truth, but it's what the wounding has done. And then that stays in our spirit, our spiritual heart, that lives from I'm not lovable, or I'm not important, or I'm not good enough. And we then throughout life are always trying to compensate for that. It's a wounding because the truth is we are perfect how we are. We are love, how we are. But we have to remember that. So that's the work that I do, is helping people release that energy of whatever pain happened to them. And it might be serious stuff, but it might also be like just normal life stuff. But a child will interpret that through a childlike lens, which is, like I have a client whose older sister, when she was 5 years old, got something from her mom, and then the younger sister asked for it, and the mom said, no, you didn't eat your lunch yet. You have to eat your lunch first. And in that moment, she decided, my mom loves my sister more than me. And lived from that decision, which wasn't the truth, right? So that's the kind of wounding that all shows up for all of us.
So it's not necessarily that someone has verbally criticized us, but it's just our interpretation in a child's body of what happened, in our interpretation that it was, something other than just the facts of what it was.
Yeah. And it may be nobody criticized us. It also may be somebody criticized us.
Either.
But even then, like, let's just say we are born into households where the people who are taking care of us are challenged. They are alcoholics. Like my dad was an alcoholic. They struggle with what their life experiences are, and they don't have the best tools. So even if they do criticize, or even if they are really rough on the kid will decide, this is a problem with me. They wouldn't do that if I was better, which is also not the truth. It's not about the kid, it's about the caregiver's ability to have coping skills and parenting skills like that, right? So whichever it is, it's still bottom line, the child interprets it as a meaning about them and a flaw about them that then carries through life. And it shows up in our physical health. It also shows up in all areas of our life, but health is my background. So
yeah. So when you're exploring this with your clients, are you going back to their kind of the trigger that set them off, or is this often hidden and it takes some time to get to?
both. Sometimes people know very clearly, yep, this is what I dealt with. We don't always have to go back there. We certainly don't have to go back into any particular memory if somebody's not comfortable, because the tools that I use as a whole life coach is really bringing in, so we use different parts of the nervous system. We move energy through the nervous system, through particular areas, using our hands. And if anybody's ever done like this with their hands, you can feel the energy, right? There's a lot of energy that comes through our hands. So we use that energy and we direct it at different points of the nervous system while we focus on love and pulling the frequency of love through the body. And where we place our hands is specific to different issues that someone might have. But that over time helps to clear out that stuck energy and helps their nervous system to calm down.
So when you're doing this with someone, so there's an actual, I wouldn't say it, like it's an activity, a physical activity that they're feeling the energy between their hands, and then they're moving their hands to that part of the body. And as they're going through that and focusing on love, are you also incorporating something to help them change their perspective on what they thought was a flaw in themselves?
Yeah, that's the transformation part. And I've been doing transformational coaching since the 90s, really. So we start to look at what are my patterns of thinking? How did I interpret that? Is that really the truth? What else could be true? Like, so that people can start to see that. So as you're changing your thinking and your perceptions, and then we're also moving out the energy and the frequency, and we're also returning back. I do a lot of work on self-love, right? Because people have disconnected from really loving themselves in an effort to prove they're lovable. Right. So yes, we did. So that's the transformation part. And then I've added in like really connecting, because it's our spiritual heart that knows the truth. Our conscious mind is believing the lies, but our spiritual heart knows the truth. So we want to get those back into alignment.
And how do you get the conscious mind to believe in the spiritual heart? Because when you've been programmed for decades and decades to think I'm ugly or I'm not good enough, how do you tap into that spiritual heart enough that your conscious thoughts actually change?
So there's a couple of pieces to the answer to that. One thing is, if somebody's not doing the transformational work of actually looking at what are the thoughts I've been telling myself, what have I been believing? And then I have like multiple distinctions that we go through and work on to help people dismantle that. It's like an automatic machine in their head. So there's work to do to dismantle that. But if somebody's not doing that and they're just doing the spiritual heart stuff, using their hands and their nervous system, and it can take, maybe it takes longer, but because they're not, working on how they're thinking as well. But what I know from my training, and there's probably, I think 500 or 600 people in the world who are doing this too. So when we get on coaches training calls and, what everybody's sharing with each other, people will get there if they consistently do it, even if they're not changing their thoughts, because if you're consistent, and that consistently means a couple of times a day, sometimes, daily, maybe more than once daily, of getting that nervous system out of that pattern. So it can go faster if you're doing the transformational thinking part.
Got it. Okay. And then when you're doing the spiritual healing part of it, and you say you're doing it a couple times a day, are there specific times a day where it's better to do it, versus other times, like morning and night before you go to bed, right when you wake up? Or is it just do it?
The short answer is just do it, right? If whatever works for you is what works for you, then do it. I mean, in an ideal world, waking up into a body that you prepare for the day from that kind of place is a better idea, right? And then going to sleep in a body that just calmed itself down and got present to love and shifted the nervous system is a better idea. But we don't want to have one more thing to stress about. We don't want to have one more thing to make ourselves wrong about. So if it's like, I get up, I get the kids off to school, and by 10 o'clock, then I have a half hour for myself. Okay, great. Then do it then.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's not, that's one main tool, but I just want to like really point out to people, what I see, and it's not that I made this up, it's what I've learned in my training, is the link between our health and our spirituality. So in our culture, people have really we've really separated. You've got your physical body over here and how it works. You've got your spiritual body over there, and you go to a priest or a clergyman for that. You go to a doctor for this, and they're not connected. And what more and more people are recognizing is they're absolutely connected, and you can't really separate them. So if you're not addressing one, which is what I found out and why I, really focused on this, because, there's plenty of, you can go anywhere and find out a gut cleanse. You can go somewhere and do a liver detox. But this part to me was more difficult to find how to address it. But For example, in autoimmune disease, which 80 million people have, and I feel like, is my video keeps pausing? Does that
You're
happen?
fine. You're
Oh,
fine.
okay. On my end, I keep seeing it. Okay, good.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Awesome, thanks. So 80 million people have autoimmune, and that's just one example of all the chronic health issues out there. But autoimmune is when the immune system no longer recognizes the body that it's protecting, right?
Yep.
That's the physical representation of a spirit that's no longer recognizing its true self and its true essence. So
Okay.
when I don't recognize the truth of me, which is that I'm love and perfect, and I've spent my whole life feeling not good enough and worthless and unlovable, I've disconnected. And then it shows up when autoimmune is actually symptoms are showing up and there's a diagnosis. It's been brewing for years. And I had 4 autoimmune diagnoses. So I know what I'm talking about there.
Yeah, you do.
And then, so that's one perspective to look at. And here's another piece I just want people to consider is that when we talk about energetic frequencies and then the physical world is light. We can see light. We don't see all light spectrum. Some of it is not visible to our eyes, but there's light. The energetic equivalent of that is love. That's why you'll hear people say light and love.
Yeah, sure.
Love is the energy of it. Light is the physical representation of it. When people are sick and they go to have diagnostic tests, CAT scans, PET scans, MRIs, all of that, what the doctors look for are dark spots. When they see an x-ray, there's a dark spot, there's a dark spot, there's a dark spot. Because it's the absence of light in the body, which is the absence of love energetically, that changes how the cells function. So as you know, when somebody is in fight or flight long enough, the mitochondria shut down. The mitochondria stop doing what they're supposed to do so the cell can make energy. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. The mitochondria get their information from the sunlight, from sun. So they need light to do their job. We need love for our body to work. So there's plenty of places where you can look and see the spiritual connection to the physical body.
That's a great way of putting it and kind of explaining it. Now, when someone's in a fight or flight mode and they are so disconnected with their body, and I see this all the time, they can't feel anything.
Right.
They are so turned off from their body. They can't feel if a muscle is working, if it's not working. I'll ask people when they're walking, what muscles do you feel walking you? And they say, I don't feel anything. And obviously muscles are working, otherwise it'd be a puddle on the floor. But I can imagine when you're taking them through the spiritual healing and you're trying to get them to sense energy between their hands, for some that might be a difficult thing. Do you have a way to help them through that, or have you not found that to be a challenge?
I absolutely know what you're talking about. Yes, people are so out of their body. That's why it's referred to as disembodied. I'm not a trauma therapist, but I do work with people who have had trauma. I've had trauma, right? You've probably had trauma. We don't get through childhood without trauma. Again, whether it was big stuff or little stuff. But so there's kind of like baby steps to getting people back into their body. I use heart math. Have you ever heard of heart math?
I have, yeah. But why don't you explain that? Not everyone's heard of it.
Okay, I'm a heart math practitioner, and heart math is heart-brain coherence, meaning getting your heart and your brain in coherent communication. And so the very first tool or step that heart math teaches, heart math is an institute in California that has been researching stress for the past, 60 or 70 years at this point. So they're one of the leading people on looking at stress, the effects on their body, and how to get stress out of your body and emotions. And they also look at different groups of people, cardiovascular disease or depression or autoimmune disease, and what using their tools in particular, how the symptoms, respond. And always the symptoms improve to disappear when people do anything regularly, right? Right. There's lots of great tools out there, but HeartMath teaches that. And one of the very first tools is getting connected to your heart. Your heart, not only your physical beating heart, but your heart center right here. And we put our hands here because, again, there's energy. Even if you can't feel that, you're a being that's alive. So there's energy running through you. So you put your hands on your heart, and then you imagine your heart center as you breathe. Sorry, I have dogs. Come here. So dropping down into the heart, getting out of the head and down into the heart is the first step. So even just imagining that. But I also do some other things like different senses. What do I hear right now? Well, I just heard my dog whimpering. A little while ago, I could hear my dryer tumbling. I can hear birds outside. Okay, what do I smell, if anything? What do I taste on my mouth? What was the last taste? So getting into the body, and then even progressive muscle contraction, relaxation. So those are places to start to get them to, be down into their body.
Okay. Well, that's good. And I can see, even if they can't understand the energy part of it, some people, aren't quite there yet, but at least you're leading them into the body first and being more aware of what the body can and can't do and how it can feel and sense. So I can see how you can transition that into more of the deeper stuff.
Yeah, I'm sharing with you the energy, the thought about the energy behind it. Some people are like, I don't even know what you're talking about, which is totally fine. You still have a heart, you still have muscles, we still you have a nervous system. So when I talk about moving energy, here's the pituitary gland, then we have, the vagus nerve coming down here. We have right and left brain. We have here at the throat, goes back to the spinal column and all of the nervous system going down. So people understand that, and we're just moving energy. I think this is helpful too, is I usually start the conversation at some point in the beginning of the conversation, is that we actually have 3 circulatory systems. We have our cardiovascular, which moves blood. Everybody knows that. We have our lymph, which moves out waste. And we have energy, which is also we just don't see that. You can't see it in a microscope, but your energy is moving throughout your body, and it has to move in a particular direction, just like the blood does and the lymph, right? So we're moving the energy. That's the energy force that's keeping you alive. And we're doing that throughout your nervous system. So I think people can understand that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it seems like this is like a slightly different take on energy work, where you have an energy work practitioner who is moving your energy. You're working on getting people to move their own energy. Does that sound right? Okay.
Yes, especially because, you can move energy even from a distance, like Reiki practitioners, but I work with a lot of people all over the world, actually, England, Spain, and around our country. So, but what I really want people to learn is that we can greatly heal ourselves. We don't have to rely on someone else to come and do it on us. We have the ability to understand how our bodies work and to do those things. We just need to be taught.
Right. And it's not intuitive. It's not as if we learn this growing up. And luckily we have people like you who study this, have learned from other practitioners, people who are experimenting on people and how to get this to work. So it's nice to hear kind of your perspective and how you are working with people who show up completely different. Like there's no set pattern in anyone when it comes to health. So this is pretty amazing that you're able to do this with people and teach them the skill.
Yeah, thank you. Again, it came from my own journey of myself and the people I was working with when I was focused on the functional health stuff of like, what else is there? There's a missing piece that we're not getting. What is that? So I didn't dream up or, create any of this. I just kept looking and kept acquiring, and emotions too can get stuck in the body. So I do that too, because every emotion, so love is an emotion and it's got its frequency, but anger has its frequency, sadness, whatever, and those things can get stuck in our body. So I also help people move specific emotions out of their body, which frees up their body. Their physiology works differently when those emotions, when those frequencies are out.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some of the other types of health conditions that you see? You mentioned autoimmune, but what are some of the other ones out there that people can relate to that often show up as a result of some type of spiritual wounding?
To be honest, all physical health conditions are the result of cells that aren't functioning the way they were designed. When God made the design, he knew what he was doing. The immune system knows what to do. Whether it's viruses or bacteria, you give it the right tools, it knows what to do. Before we had this modern culture, we've been on this planet and we were made to survive on this planet. But people forget that and they just rely on a pill or something to, just make me feel better. But when you allow and you get the environment of the cells to a place where they can do their job, the way that we are designed is to do the job. And when we are not giving them those, then whether it's cancer, depression, however it shows up, and that's probably a genetic thing, like whatever is your weakest link is how it's going to show up. My mother had multiple sclerosis, I had autoimmune issues. That's an autoimmune disease, right? If cancer is in the family, then it'll be cancer, but that gene, whether that gets turned on or off, depends on how we run the show.
Right.
So by, giving the cells the opportunity to do their job, any health issue will respond. In fact, so what I'm talking about, what I use is something called healing codes. Have you ever heard of healing codes?
No. Why don't you go into that?
Okay. Well, that's what I was talking about.
Okay.
There's a book written by Dr. Alex Lloyd and Dr. Ben Johnson. Dr. Johnson has since passed away, but he was an oncologist, a doctor of oncology, and he got Lou Gehrig's disease, which, as you know, usually has a very poor recovery rate. He went to Dr. Lloyd because there was no other option, and he had heard about Dr. Lloyd. This is 30 years ago. He not only reversed his Lou Gehrig's disease, he became symptom-free. He lived for another 20 years, no Lou Gehrig's disease.
Wow.
And the two of them wrote this book together and worked with people and then trained people. But, what they say is, I've seen from multiple places that's their tool, but there's other people doing, similar kind of work. I do a lot of forgiveness work with my clients because forgiveness, Dr. Johnson, who was the oncologist, he said there's every single cancer has an unforgiveness and anger component to it, right? There's a guy, Colin Tippings. Have you ever heard of Colin Tippings?
No.
He wrote a book called Radical Forgiveness, which was all about forgiveness, but from a spiritual, not traditional forgiveness, but it's a different kind of perspective, which is what I use with my clients. He and his wife were running cancer workshops, specifically any kind of cancer. They would do several day workshops completely on forgiveness, and people were going back for their next checkups and the cancer was gone. Because it's the frequency of the anger and the unforgiveness that stops the immune system from doing its job.
And I can believe that. I can think of people in my life who I know who are getting cancer in their 40s and very young. And there is an anger to their underlying personality that because they haven't let something go. And it's really sad to see. And they have to be ready and willing to let that go and seek the help. Sometimes they're not, unfortunately. So it's definitely important to get this information out there so people who are holding some type of anger in them, work hard to release it. Find a person like you who can help them release it and shift the way their body behaves.
Yeah, I think to your point, sometimes it takes people to be really at a crisis to look and
Yeah.
say, all right, I'm willing to stop being right about
Yeah.
how terrible somebody was to me, you know,
Yeah.
rather than wait for a crisis, that we all just live our best life by releasing that. But sometimes it's not conscious. I mean, it sounds like you can see that in some of the people you're thinking of, but sometimes people are going along completely unconscious to whatever it is they're holding, if it's anger or if it's, just unworthiness.
Yeah.
I'm sure, have you ever heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza?
Yes, I was going to mention him. He helps people through cancer all the time.
Absolutely. And I did his retreat last summer, one of his retreats. But he always has testimonies. And I remember this woman who was probably in her 60s, and she was like, I own a health food store. I know all the wheatgrass, the supplements. I eat organic. I have a shop and I sell it. She got, was it colon cancer or liver cancer? I can't remember. So she was up sharing her story and going on. And she said, the thing that made my cancer go away. And she's like, and now I am cancer free. And she was at stage 4. They were like, we got nothing left. Yeah. She said, was my unworthiness. Until I released my unworthiness, it didn't matter how healthy I ate. It didn't matter what supplements I took. It didn't matter what chemotherapy they gave me. So, yeah.
Our body listens to what's inside us and what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what our spirit is saying. And so much we don't know how to decipher that communication. And it's hard. Luckily, you have found this path. You've poked at it a while. You went through the physical aspects of it, gut, nutrition, toxins, which are important. Those are definitely important. And sometimes those do wreak havoc with our health. But like you said, it didn't solve everything. And so you have to go to that deeper level and see what is still not coherent with the rest of the body.
Yeah, because if you change your gut microbiome or you get your toxins out, if you're doing that on a landscape that is not working correctly, it's not going to work. Like I can change my diet again and again and again, and I can do another detox again and again and again, but the landscape has to be fertile. Right. So to my mind anyway, that's why I was like, I'm going to the landscape. I've done enough stool tests for people. I've looked at enough poop results, but I want to actually help them heal their heart, not their poop.
Yeah. Now, with this transformation in yourself and your career and how you help people, how have your clients responded as well? Because they're used to seeing you as, okay, we're looking at these physical things, the, toxins, the parasites, all that stuff. Has it been easy to talk to them and work through with them? Hey, we need to do some soul searching as well.
That's a great question. I think most people know that somewhere inside. Maybe nobody said it to them, or, they didn't really put the pieces together. But when you finally have the conversation, they're like, yeah, that resonates. Or even with somebody that I've never worked with, but they'll start talking about health because they find me through as an FDN. I don't really do that anymore. I usually refer them to someone. But, when they start talking, every single time there's a unique version of the same story. So it's their version of my childhood was really hard, or I had a terrible marriage, or I had great loss. I lost someone suddenly or unexpectedly, or I've had boom, 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 boom. There's always some version of that. So when I start to say, this is a place to look, they get it.
Yeah, that's great. And the work that you do now in this realm, is it one-on-one or is it in a group format?
It's both. I have a small group because a lot of especially the transformational thinking, that can be done in a group because there's just ways that we perceive the world and perceptions, and there's distinctions that I work with people, and we do that in group.
Okay.
But I also do one-on-one. So I do a hybrid group, and then
Mhm.
each of those group members get some one-on-one sessions.
Nice.
I also have one-on-one clients who just are one-on-one.
Okay. Well, that's good, because I know sometimes when you're exposing yourself and becoming vulnerable to parts of the past, sometimes it's hard to share initially. And as you start to change and grow and you feel that coherence between your body, mind, and spirit, then it's almost like you can share it with other people because you've gone up over that hill and you feel like you've conquered it. You may still be growing and going through it, but it's not so informidable, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. But what's great about the small group is you could, like, let's just say right now there were 6
Yeah.
faces on the Zoom link,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So there's 6 of us, and you and I are talking.
Mhm.
Sally over there in the corner, she may not say a word and she may not be comfortable, but as you and I are talking, in her head, she's like, oh, that's me. Like, she's getting it without having to talk. So
Mhm.
sometimes the group makes it safer, whereas one-on-one, maybe they don't want to say anything just yet, even just to
Yeah.
me.
It's true.
So I can have a conversation with you, and Sally can go, oh, I see how that, sometimes it's easier to see it for somebody else than for yourself. So that's
Yeah.
a really great dynamic that the small group brings.
That's amazing. Well, I really appreciate that. Is there anything that we didn't cover about this whole process that you do that you wanted to share? Anything else?
Thank you. No, I could talk about it all day, but but I guess
Yeah.
we went over all the important stuff. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all this. How can people reach out to you to get involved and you work with you?
Thank you. Yeah. So my website is lindadowneycoaching.com.
Okay.
So my name, Linda Downey, which is DOWNEY, lindadowneycoaching.com. I have a business page on Facebook and on Instagram, Linda Downey Coaching. So send me an email, find me on social media, and send me a message, and I would be happy to chat with you.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining us once again. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. You are never ending in your growth. So I'm sure next year you'll be learning something else that you can share with us. So I always appreciate how dedicated you are to everyone you work with. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy. That's wonderful to say. I am that, like, okay, what's next? What's next? That's me. So anyway, thank you. But thank you for letting me be on. I love talking with you, and I hope that provides something great for your audience.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have you here. Please go check out Linda's website, lindadowneycoaching.com. Go check out her work, join her groups or her one-on-one sessions to get some help. And we'll see you again next week. Bye now.
Bye-bye.